Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Igrihe.
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
Happy New Year's, everybody, and this is episode 133 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your movie and TV-obsessed host, Cinik. Joining me, as always, my co-host and the best friend a guy can ask for, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim, and we are here to break down the year that was 2019, a year that Popeye's classic chicken sandwich roared in like a lion, and Game of Thrones went out like a poorly lit Starbucks drinking lamb. So let's get this started and see what happened over in TV land. Ryan, what was your number 5 top show of 2019?
There's actually a lot of contenders, but number 5 for me is going to be Fleabag. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's just seems to have. She had the other one for top 5. Killing Eve, actually, though they were neck and neck, but I went with that one. But she wrote stars in it's just a phenomenal show. It's really funny, great cast. Andrew Scott of Sherlock fame is in season 2 and is really good. And it's just really a really smart, well written show. Kind of breaks the fourth wall. It's really all the time. It's really funny. It's really smart. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's really a great show.
Well, I know it's been a powerhouse during the award seasons, right? I mean, they are sweeping everything that they get nominated for.
It's one of those shows where it's absolutely binge worthy. It's something that you'll start watching it. And for me, it was like right off the bat, it was just immediately captivating. And I'm regrettably, it's in my honorable mentions, but it didn't make it in my top 5. But I absolutely love that show.
How about you, Kim? What's number 5 for you this year?
So number 5 for me is actually Game of Thrones. I loved the entire series, and I was very much excited about tuning in every single week and seeing how the story kind of winded down. I was a little bit disappointed with how they kind of played out the last episode, but basically being able to watch these powerhouse families fight for their freedoms and their powers, all set back in like the 13th century. I just thought was absolutely fantastic. It was, despite what people do or don't love about it, it was a beautifully directed and cinematic type of feature film every single week. And it was just one of those things that I genuinely missed not seeing it on TV every single week.
Yeah, it wasn't just a show. It was an event every week. I really loved Game of Thrones, and we can complain about the last season, but they can't undo the other 7 seasons that were amazing. It's still going to come top 2 on my best of all time list if we were going to talk about shows. And it's right there with Breaking Bad. It's right there with The Wire. The creators and writers did us a little bit of a disservice, and we could be a little bitter about that, but we invested 8 or 9 years of our life into the show. So we deserved a little bit better of an ending, but I thought the season all in all was pretty good. They just made a couple silly decisions that I kind of had a little bit of a problem with. Other than that, it was a proper goodbye to most of the characters that we loved.
In a vacuum, the season was great. And I'm sure I outside of a few episodes, I gave some really good reviews for some of those for some of the episodes. I think the big issue with it was that it was such a change of tone and change of pace from what we had gotten before that it was really jarring. And I think that, I mean, who's to say what we deserved because the books weren't finished and they were checked out. It could have been 2 or 3 more seasons to really tie things up neatly. And they went the kind of big cinematic route with everything, which was great, but it was just such a change of pace. I think that's really where it just caught us off guard, and it wasn't what we were expecting. So yeah, it's still, like you said, Cinik, it's still gonna be one of my, it's still top two shows of all time. If not, it's right up there, Breaking Bad and The Wire. In any given day, I pick one ahead of the other, but it just doesn't quite stick the landing the way that Breaking Bad did. But overall, it's still a phenomenal show. So, I was sad that it didn't make my top 5. But it's that's just shows there was some great TV out there, and maybe just a little bit of disappointment from what had been building up to.
IG, two very solid choices. What's your number 5?
I've long said that Eugene Levy is one of the hardest working men in all of Hollywood. If you go back and look, especially in the 90s and 2000s, he was in nearly everything. He'd just show up randomly in movies. And he finally got his own TV series a few years back called Schitt's Creek, and it's gotten progressively better every season. And it's about the Rose family, who were affluent and rich and everything, and living in New York and penthouse apartments and beautiful lives. And all of a sudden things crumble and they end up living in a town called Schitt's Creek. Spelled a little differently, obviously Schitt, but still Schitt's Creek. It's comedy. It's got a little bit of drama in it. Pretty good storytelling. Eugene Levy and his son is in it. So like two people with those obnoxious eyebrows. Catherine O'Hara, who I think is always hilarious as a former actress who's trying to get back into acting. It's a really funny series. I really enjoy it. I've binged a lot of it on Netflix. The current season is on Pop Network, but it'll show up on Netflix as well. But it's out there. Go watch it. Schitt's Creek. It's hilarious.
Yeah, they're all really solid choices. My number 5, I got into it a little bit late in the game, but it's season 2 of You on Netflix. Take the craziest, most obsessive ex that you have. You give them near genius intelligence and hacker-like techno savvy, and you have my new friend Joe Goldberg. The main character of this show finds random women, gets completely obsessed with them, and then stalks them to no end. It's creepy. It's a lot of fun. He'll do anything to get in a relationship with these people. And there's so many twists and turns and a little bit of murder and intrigue in every single episode. I mean, it's a complete car wreck, and season 2 is definitely not a letdown from season 1. It's just a lot of fun, and it makes you take stock of who you allow in your life and kind of who you allow access to your world. You is an absolute can't miss. Ryan, what's your number 4 choice?
Number 4 is The Boys. You guys know I've been looking forward to this show for a year. It's one of my favorite comic books, and I think the adaptation was just like near perfect. They really kind of captured the tone of the comics while, making necessary changes for TV. Just the cast is all perfect. Everybody is great. Homelander is one of my favorite kind of villains in a really, really long time. I just love The Boys. Really excited about season 2. And yeah, that's easily number 4. And I mean, in another year, it'd probably be number 1, but it just shows again how many great shows we have that The Boys, which is near perfect TV, just comes in at number 4 for me.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And the preview just got me a little more hyped because they left on such kind of a cliffhanger that I can't wait to see what happens next. Hey, Kim, what's number 4 for you?
So number 4 for me is completely unrelated to any kind of Cine documentary or anything like that. It's a cartoon. I love Rick and Morty. I waited a really long time for this season to come back on TV. And as most people know, it's loosely based off of Doc and Marty from Back to the Future, but it follows the life of super genius scientist Rick Sanchez and his grandson Morty as they kind of get into some hijinks and do interdimensional travel and whatnot. I think what I love so much about it is that there's like an embedded joke every 35 seconds, and you got to be pretty quick to pick up on some of the stuff. It's a lot of really dry humor, a lot of sarcasm, a lot of cynicism. I absolutely love the show. It's definitely not something I would probably let little kids watch, but as an adult who grew up in the 90s cartoon era, this like really resonates with me, and I just absolutely love the show. Can't say enough about it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. The animation style is a little old and jarring a little bit, and it's kind of maybe simple, but the writing is there, and it's entertaining to watch, and I do enjoy it. It's been a lot of fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to getting to this season, the current season. I'm just rewatching the other ones to kind of be refresh because it's been a couple of years since I watched any of it.
Yeah, I like that they're kind of it's because there's been a bit of like toxic fandom within the world of that show, and I kind of like that they're kind of calling those people out through some of the episodes. I really like the meta aspect of the show. I like the season a lot. I gotta watch things again because I'm not sure if it's quite up to par with some previous seasons, but it's just great to have the show back because it's so good. And even if it's like 80% of it at its best, it's still better than almost anything out there.
Number 4 for me is the HBO show Silicon Valley, about a fledgling tech company starting up and becoming a juggernaut and then realizing they've created a monster. It's really, really well done. It's hilarious to watch, you know, and having worked in the tech industry previously, it's surprisingly accurate how things go in there. And just you've got one guy that is kind of the quote unquote master coder that just thinks everybody else is an idiot. And 90% of the time he turns out to be right. And that's Guilfoyle. He's hilarious. Also got Kumail Nanjiani, who's funny in just about everything I've seen him in. And this is no exception. Thomas Middleditch in this is just spot on as just neurotic, but brilliant. And he's the CEO of the company. A lot of good things. This was the final season, so it's all over now. But it's been a good run. I'll watch it again. I've really enjoyed it. Silicon Valley is my number 4.
I really enjoyed that show the first couple seasons. I've got to go back and kind of catch up with the later. Once they lost TJ Miller, it kind of lost a little bit of the shine for me because it felt like the show kind of lost its way. So I don't know how this season looks, but I know that previous seasons of the show were hilarious. It's a Mike Judge show, so you really can't go wrong with that. Number 4 for me is The Marvelous Miss Maisel Season 3. This absolutely amazing show is set in the 60s, and it's just a fun ride as the maverick that is Miss Maisel continues to climb the comedy ladder and finally starts to make a name for herself while juggling being a mother, a daughter, and an on and off again wife. It's won tons of awards. The actresses absolutely chew up every single scene that they're in. Rachel Bronson and Alex Borstein are just, they're gold when they're on screen together. They play off each other so well, and I love the time period, and I can't get enough of the show. It's not something that I would generally watch, but I'm a fan of Miss Maisel. I'm unapologetic about it.
Yeah, she's actually, that entire show is actually my number 3. To be a woman in the 50s when it's like Stepford Wife-ish, you know, you're supposed to be Little Miss Betty Crocker and you're sarcastic. You think for yourself and you have a sense of frickin' humor, and you decide that of all the things that you're going to do in a Jewish family, basically in the show, they're willing her to just marry well. She decides that she's going to just detour from all of this and become a comedian. And her cohort for this, Alex Borstein, I think, who is just the polar opposite of a social class, but is trying her damnedest to be her manager for the show, it's just so well done. It's quirky, and I absolutely love that show. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Jane Lynch has been on the last 2 seasons, and she's hilarious every single time she's on. She's not just a comedic actress. She's an actress. Like, she is just a commanding presence when she's on the screen. Ryan, what's your number 3?
So hard. My number three is, it's almost, I'm in a 3-way tie for 1. So I'm just going to throw out The Mandalorian as number 3. We've reviewed it, so you know my thoughts on the show. It's a nice palate cleanser for the last trilogy, whether you loved them or not, or hated them. Just the fact that it took Star Wars, it made it simple, you know, a simple storytelling, but really great storytelling. Just an amazing job of making things matter, making things important, making us care about characters. Performances are great. Baby Yoda is the greatest thing ever. Amazing supporting cast and just amazing cameos throughout. Funny when it needs to be funny, you know, gives you the feels when it needs to give you the feels. I mean, it really set a new bar for what to expect for Star Wars, and especially for Star Wars TV. And yeah, I just love the show. I know you guys love the show. I'm really excited for season 2. And yeah, you know, at the end, 3-way tie for me, but I'll throw The Mandalorian out there.
All right. So my number 3 is going to be The Umbrella Academy. I really like this. This is basically, if you took the Teen Titans and aged them up 20 years, what would be going on, right? So you have superpowers. You're a kid. You're part of a team, and you've got a manager, and everybody kind of takes care of everything and sends you out to do heroic things. But you got to grow up, and feelings happen, and people go their own ways, and other things kind of go away. what's going to happen to these kids? And this is what that show basically answers. And it's done in a very interesting way. I really, really enjoyed this series. It's on Netflix. A lot of fun to watch. A lot of good acting in it. Ellen Page really steals the show. Tom Hopper's in it. Does a great job. It's just extraordinarily well done. It's well written. It's well acted. And season 2 will be coming shortly. I'm really excited. The Umbrella Academy is number 3.
It's not too late to start binge watching that first season now because it is so freaking good. Like, plan a Sunday around it and just grab some popcorn and chill the heck out because it is amazing.
Number 3 for me was season 2 of Mindhunter. This compelling and creepy show only took it up a notch in its second season as our heroes head to Atlanta to investigate a predator that was killing inner city kids. You mix that with the revolving door of interviews with some of the who's who of psychopaths of all time. Mindhunter is an absolute must watch on my list. It's Netflix. Don't turn your lights out. Don't watch it in the dark. Don't watch it alone because it'll just creep you out to no end. A little bit of Charles Manson this season. You can't go wrong with Mindhunter. I like the show so much that I ended up going and buying the book.
Yeah, Mindhunter is by all means a great show. And part of the reason it's not on my top 5 is just trying to get a little bit of diversity and because I really like these other shows as well. But it was really close to making my top 5 as well. Really well done. And there are a lot of actual interviews with some of these serial killers that they do on the show. And if you play them side by side with the actor and the serial killer themselves, they're very close.
Yeah, the authenticity of the show is amazing. If you go back and you look at the serial killers, and even if you listen to some of their interviews with these guys, it's pretty spine-chilling. Ryan, what's your number 2 show?
Number 2 is What We Do in the Shadows. I was really highly excited about the show, anticipating it because I see the movie and really enjoy the movie. And it is a phenomenal show. It's like, again, near perfect, just really funny. Again, one of the great cameos that are used perfectly. I love the quirky humor. I love the characters. Just nearly perfect television. I think this is number 1 for me. And The Mandalorian, it's hard to find any faults with them. Really, really great show.
Yeah, that Taika Waititi, he's a home run every single time that he does something. And I was surprised based off the type of humor that they used in the show, how much I actually liked it. And I can't wait for the next season. I mean, it was hilarious. The energy vampire is my absolute favorite character of all time.
Well, I can also add in that it's also my number 2. And for a lot of the same reasons, the energy vampire is probably the best new character on television. He's hilarious, especially when he finds another energy vampire. I just couldn't laugh any more than when that shit was going on. So good, so well done, so well acted. The episode with the Vampire Council was probably the funniest thing I've seen in years on television.
Kim, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is Glow, Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling. If you haven't seen it, I totally recommend it. It's loosely follows Allison Brie. Her character's name is Ruth, and she is an out-of-work actress back in the, I think it's the early 80s, late 70s. Just happens to fall backwards into this pilot of an idea for wrestling with Mark Maron as Sam Sylvia, who is the ladies coach, but he can't get his shit together. He's a complete train wreck. He's got a cocaine addiction. He's got illegitimate children. He's got, 101 reasons why he shouldn't be able to hold a show together. But Ruth and these other 12 women just kind of rally together in a male-dominated industry and turn it into something, and it becomes incredibly popular and successful. And it's the whole storyline about it, the way that they make every single little detail in the show true to the time period, I think is just fascinating. And it's just really something that's awesome to watch.
Well, it's just Netflix hitting home run after home run. IG and I are huge fans of the previous seasons. I haven't gotten through this current season yet, but I will because I love the show. I loved the show growing up, the actual wrestling show. So even though they're not using the same characters, it still reminds me of that. And Netflix just hits a home run every single time with the music. The music just sets the show. They do the same thing with Stranger Things, and you can't go wrong with Glow. Number 2 for me, well, people are going to ask me, is there not a new show that made your list? And you would be wrong, because the number 2 show for me would be The Boys, Amazon's hit show. We got to spend a little bit of time with some superheroes, and in a world filled with superhero shows and movies, Amazon Prime did something a little different. It hit us with the question, what if superheroes were real and they were completely self-obsessed jerk-offs? This Carl Urban-led show is based off a comic book, and it introduced us to one of the greatest supervillains of all time, Homelander. It was different. It was raw. It was violent. It was sexy when it needed to be. The Boys hit every single note that it needed to hit, and it left us on a bit of a cliffhanger. I absolutely loved the show. It was probably one of my favorite shows of all time. And I mean, Homelander is just an amazing, slarmy, jerk-off Superman-esque villain. It was a great show.
Any show that solves the problem of a superhero with impenetrable skin by going up the keyhole with a bomb and blowing them up from the inside has got my vote anyway. Like, they solved that whole problem in a very interesting way, or a very uncomfortable way. Kind of like in the back of a Volkswagen Bug.
Ryan, what was your number 1 show of the year?
Number 1 show of the year is Watchmen, pretty easily. I mean, yeah, I know it's in a 3-way tie, but really, I can't stop thinking about the show. It was done so well. It's one of those things that, the first few episodes, you're not quite sure what to make of it, because it's not quite, it's like a sequel to the comic / movie, and it takes place in that universe, but it's its own story. And I know for a lot of people, it was unsettling. They didn't like it. They didn't like the focus on more on race and policing. But then somewhere around episode 3-4, it really starts to tie the old in the comics in with this. And then by the end, it just is brilliant. It has, we think about, Ozymandias type episodes, Battle of the Bastards, as kind of those like standalone, like great episodes of TV. And this show has 2 of them. Episode 6 and 8, if you end up watching it, or if you have watched it or haven't watched it, are just some of the best things to me, I've ever seen on TV, that level of good. And then in addition to that, it really does stick the landing. I think it does a great job of tying everything up. I don't need another season. As great as the show is, I think it was perfect. In one season. It has phenomenal performances. Jeremy Irons is amazing as Ozymandias, kind of spoiler alert. Regina Hall is great and really an awesome lead, and makes us, she really should be in more and should have more leading roles, and she's a badass. And I think they just did an amazing job taking a world that we knew and many of us loved, and both making it familiar, but really making it its own story, and really telling a great, smart story that had something to say. I just love the show. It's one of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen. Up there with, I put it up there with anything.
I've watched a couple episodes of that. The episodes I've watched are good. I'm going to finish the season. I've still had a couple of problems with it, like, early on, not explaining why squid are falling from the sky. But I do enjoy it, and it is shot well. It's beautifully acted. Good to look at.
I think it's one of those things where you have to finish it, because by the time you get to the end, everything makes sense. And even those first couple episodes, which are kind of iffy, are brilliant, because it all kind of comes together. So it's one of those shows, like, when you see it, I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, because it really does pay off, in my opinion, brilliantly.
So I had a really hard time trying to decide between one of 2 shows. And for me, it kind of came down to, is it going to be a Netflix number 1, or is it going to be an Amazon Prime number 1? I struggled between The Crown, which I absolutely adored and felt emotionally compelled, in order to choose that one. However, I ended up going with The Man in the High Castle. This entire series was just brilliant. And it essentially, the premise of the show is, what if America did not win World War II, and America became half occupied Japan and half occupied Germany? And what happens, to the storyline of these people that are living within it, and where is this neutral zone and whatnot. The show ran for 4 seasons. In 2019, the 4th season finally aired, and it is breathtaking. It is brilliant. It's probably one of the very few shows where it I will sit and I will binge watch this from beginning to end. It is like another Game of Thrones to me. I thought the entire show was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I've seen the first 2 seasons and I really, really like it. It was one of those shows where, it's off for a while and I got to get back to it. It's on my list. I'm like rewatching the Clone Wars now. So when I'm done with the Clone Wars, Man in the High Castle is like next on my list of things to catch up on.
Well, Ryan already took it, but my number one as a real Star Wars fan, sorry, Ryan, has got to be The Mandalorian. Finally getting something live action, Star Wars related that is just, it feels so Star Wars. It feels so right. Was just a godsend to me in 2019. Took 42 years to get something like this in the Star Wars universe. The only other live action TV thing we've ever had before this was the holiday special. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it and see how awful it really is. It's terrible. This, by no stretch of the imagination, is wonderful. And even if you're not a Star Wars fan, this is an enjoyable show. It's a lot of fun to watch, and you will gain attachments to things in this show without being a Star Wars fan, without knowing any of the secret hidden Easter egg things that are around. It's still enjoyable. I love it. The Mandalorian is by far, for me, the greatest show of the year. And I just can't wait for season 2. I'm so excited.
I think that it's branching out like a legacy type of, series, movie series, and it's making itself more accommodating and available for a younger audience. And it's tying in multi-generations of fandom into falling in love with the idea of the Star Wars universe. It's incredible how, I have a 13-year-old niece who has never seen a single episode of any of the Star Wars movies, but she has seen every single episode of The Mandalorian, and it has ignited an interest in her that has made her want to go through on, Disney Plus and just start binge watching the movies. And one of the most satisfying things in my entire life is getting a text message from my niece and asking me which sequential order should she be watching these movies in, so she gets it right.
It's my number one too, and 7 out of the 8 episodes were near perfect. I enjoyed every second of it, and it did so much for the fans. Like, as torn as the community is over the movies, for the most part, everybody agreed they loved The Mandalorian. And I turned a ton of people onto this show, and it was good for the Johnny-come-lately fans, but it was also good for the hardcores because you got a guy running around with the damn ice cream maker from Empire Strikes Back. In the Yoda thing, which I thought would be a distraction in the downfall of the show, only made it stronger. In 4 hours, we've now coronated Jon Favreau as king of Star Wars, and we want him to take over the franchise because somebody has to. Somebody needs to come and swoop this thing up and nurture it and bring it back so it can catch up with Marvel. Because, spoiler alert, I'm the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, and it didn't even make my top 5 movies of the year. We need to kind of get the ship turned around and faced in the right direction, and The Mandalorian was a very good start. And if that's the direction the franchise is headed as a whole, I'm excited about it. All right, so we're going to jump over to the top 5 movies of 2019. Kim, what was your number 5 movie?
My number 5 movie was X-Men Dark Phoenix.
Oh,
I know. We didn't say worst movie of the year. We said your favorite.
I know.
Oh, okay.
I know.
I'm just checking.
But you got to hear me out. 2019 for me was all about the superhero action movies. And when I really got to sit down and start thinking about it, I really did like the movie, despite I think I gave it like a 6.5 originally. Now that I've sat down and I have actually watched it, and you can give thumbs down me all you'd like. But now that I've actually sat down and I've watched it, I feel like there's more of a lead up into, what's next to come now that, mergers have happened and things have transpired and whatnot. I feel like there's more of a direction for where it's going. I actually did like the movie.
There was a lot of good things about it. We tease the X-Men because it's the thing to do anymore, but my heart is always with those characters. I'm a big comic book fan, and anytime you can see live action X-Men or even X-Men in animation, you got to sit and watch. I was there opening weekend. I'm not going to lie. I didn't completely brush the movie off. I enjoyed Sophie Turner as Jean Grey. There was a lot to like about the movie for sure. And anytime you can get Michael Fassbender on screen, it's pretty badass, especially as a character as powerful as Magneto. Ryan, what's your number 5?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it even more on the second viewing. It's really well done. I mean, it's peak kind of Quentin Tarantino. I love the story, but not, more than the story. I just love the character work. The relationship between Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio's characters, as the kind of, aging actor who the industry has passed him by, and his stuntman who's, seems it's like a loyal pet almost. I just love their relationship. I like how it mixes in the stuff with the Manson family, and then, the way that it subverts expectations in the end, I think is really great. And, it's just one of those, it's really rewatchable just because the dialogue is so good. The performances are so good. So, definitely one of my favorite movies of the year, and, slides in at number 5 for me.
So number 5 for me, a little bit of departure from these guys, right? Because you'd expect to come from me, either be a superhero movie or something really good like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or The Joker or something like that. But for me, the number 5 movie of the year was Good Boys, the raunchy comedy with the preteen kids. Max Lucas and Thor were hilarious in this movie. And it was something that there were so many things that these kids obviously didn't understand yet. They hadn't been exposed to it. And in today's world where every kid at 6 years old has a smartphone and can get access to anything in the world, the fact that these kids had no idea what some of this stuff was, had no idea about just things that kids today know. And I can tell you by personal experience, kids know way more than they should at their age. It was endearing. It was heartwarming, and it was hilarious. And there's just, I've watched it a few more times, and every time I watch it, it just gets almost more endearing to me. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a good movie. It's a lot of fun.
I would say that was probably one of the best comedies of 2019. It had a little bit of Superbad in it, and it was a really good movie. It was a lot of fun. We covered it. I think we gave it halfway decent ratings at the time, but upon watching it since it's been out on video, it is a pretty funny movie. And number 5 for me, and I'm going to be honest with you on this one, Ryan George was absolutely right. And I love this movie. But based off the track records of DC in the preview, I didn't have much faith in the Joker, and I went in with super low expectations, and Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips knocked me out of my chair with this dark, gritty psychological journey into the making of Batman's arch nemesis. It wasn't just a great superhero movie. It was cinematic art. It's been showered now with Academy Award nominations, which I believe are 11. Dark, it's deep, it's brooding, it's scary, and it makes you think, and it certainly doesn't glamorize mental illness. Kim, what was your number 4?
Number 4 for me was Spider-Man Far From Home. I thought it was a spectacular take on the Spider-Man movie series. I thought it came in at the right time, being that we had just come out of such a sad kind of closure to a very beloved character, and being able to have almost like a quick jump from sad and bleak to dealing with the emotions of losing Iron Man. I felt like it was just well timed. It was perfectly placed. I thought Favreau was just spectacular. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
That was a huge movie for me this year. And the fact that we were able to save him for the third movie coming up made me happy in the MCU. We got a villain in Mysterio that I think is going to carry over into other movies and maybe start to construct the Sinister Six, which is the bedtime story for any Spider-Man enthusiast. You wait for the Sinister Six to finally make its appearance on screen. There wasn't anything not to love. And I think Tom Holland settles the debate on who's the best Spider-Man. He absolutely is, hands down. I like him better than the last two guys or any animated version of the character. And Far From Home was a great and fun movie. Now, Ryan, what's your number 4?
So Joker is number 4 for me. It's funny. I'm going to tell you my number 4 movie and give you some criticism, but I think if there's anything to critique, it's that it maybe relies too heavily on Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I think the story is pretty bare, and there's some great supporting actors who don't get enough to work with. But I think the cinematography is spectacular. And, you know, having grown up in old New York, it really captures it. It really looks and feels like old New York. And I know it's Gotham City, but you know, it's supposed to be old New York. And, you know, we're supposed to look like that. And I think it really captures that. You know, it captures the right tone throughout. The score is amazing, but you know, Joaquin Phoenix's performance is so mesmerizing and you know, captivating, and that it really pushes this movie beyond what it was. And I think that in almost any other actor's hands, it's a mediocre, you know, passable movie. But in his hands, I mean, it's an Oscar caliber movie, and he deserves it. Number 4 for me, really just phenomenal take on the Joker, and I'm glad that DC, maybe this will help DC get themselves on the right track.
So number 4 for me is another kind of comedy movie. Another kind of adventure movie. It's going to be Zombieland 2, Double Tap. And I enjoyed it. Now, was it as good as the original Zombieland? Of course not. How many sequels are as good? You know, we have, it's a select few. Empire Strikes Back, a couple other things that come to mind once in a while, but very few things are as good as the original. But this was deserved, and it took them a while to get there, and they put together a good cast with the originals all coming back and adding a few other people. It was a lot of fun to watch. It was a little far-fetched, but wasn't the first one. First one's pretty far-fetched as well. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I've watched it a couple more times. It's just entertaining. And sometimes for me, what makes a great movie is, can I sit down, watch it, and just escape my life for a couple hours? And this does it for me. I'm able to just forget about everything else, shove some popcorn in my face, and enjoy myself for 2 hours.
Number 4 for me was Ford versus Ferrari. This is a huge surprise for me on my list. I went to the movie just for fun one day, and I ended up finding a gem. I mean, you mix 2 of my favorite actors of all time, Christian Bale and Matt Damon, race cars, a bit of history, and you mix that all together and you get 2 hours of an adrenaline rush that was not only a great movie, a solid story with some great acting, but it was beautifully shot. It was heartbreaking. It was fun. It was exciting. It was about 2 guys that were absolutely destined for greatness and willing to risk anything to get there. And I mean, if you look at their story, it was pretty amazing what they accomplished. We went from barely being able to compete in Le Mans to actually owning the event, which is just this 24-hour grueling race that Ferrari owned until Ford stuck its nose in and won the day. Spoiler alert. It was a great movie and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I actually got to go see that movie with my best friend, Jake, when I was up in St. Louis last. And it was one of those things where we weren't really expecting much, but it was the best of what we thought was at the theater at the time. And we went in, we sat down, and both of us just kind of came out was like, wow, we weren't expecting that, but it was really freaking good, like real good. It's definitely something I'll end up buying or downloading or whatever as soon as it comes out, because it's something I definitely want to see again.
Kim, what was your number 3?
So number 3 for me was Captain Marvel. Again, 2019 was kind of a year of superhero. Captain Marvel is one of those characters that always sort of perplexed me. It wasn't an individual that I knew a ton about. So when the movie came out, I was a little bit extra cynical. And also I thought that Brie Larson's acting was, you know, a little flat. However, the storyline itself I thought was fairly decent after I saw it twice, and I was really happy to see more of Nick Fury, you know, come into light on the screen and learning more about the actual scratch on the eye and, you know, how all of these things kind of came to be. For me, it tied together a lot of really fascinating lost bits of storyline that I felt were a little bit lacking in the Avengers series. So seeing everything kind of tying it up, but also being able to see a female in a lead role in a superhero movie, I thought was pretty great. So for me, it's got to be Captain Marvel, and it's definitely something that I've watched over again.
Not only is it Marvel, but she spends a good portion of the movie in a Nine Inch Nails t-shirt. And to me, that just gained points upon points for that. I love the music in that movie. It was bright. It was fun. There was parts of it that didn't make a lot of sense, but it did kind of introduce her in a proper way. And I hope that she's around in the MCU for years to come.
It was really entertaining to watch, and it was a different story. So they didn't do it the same way, not exactly the same way as all the other MCU people in their introductions and their solo films. And that's what I liked about it, is it changed things up a little bit and also kind of went back in time. A young Nick Fury, awesome. And he was hilarious to watch in that, like a level of comedy from Sam Jackson that we haven't gotten in quite a while. I enjoyed it quite a bit as well. It didn't make my top 5, but it'd probably be in my top 10.
Ryan, what was your number 3?
So number 3 is Knives Out. And again, it was hard for me to pick one out of the top 3, but Knives Out, Rian Johnson follows up the second best Star Wars movie of all time with the great whodunit. I know you'd love that. Featuring kind of a great new character that'll probably, Benoit Blanc, who will probably have his own series of movies now. It is an all-star cast, kind of an ensemble cast, led by Daniel Craig, who is phenomenal as this kind of detective. It's great because it's a really smart mystery that, in very kind of Rian Johnson fashion, subverts expectations and does things with the whodunit that you don't expect, but then somehow finds a way to turn it back into a whodunit. So it's just really, really well done. Phenomenal cast. If anything, I would say that the cast is underutilized. Like a lot of the people, just everyone in it. There's so many people and so many great performances that I'd love to have seen more of the family kind of in the center of it. Chris Evans is great as the, kind of one of the villain characters and just plays a complete douchebag asshole, and it's really an interesting dynamic between that and him as Captain America. But yeah, I really love Knives Out. It's probably the most fun I had watching a movie. Obviously I have 2 movies above it, but just as far as just sitting in a theater laughing and having a great time, I think that's it, and I could probably watch it 1,000 times. It's a really great movie.
So number 3 for me has got to be Avengers Endgame. Now, it's funny that it's number 3 and that there's movies ahead of it, but of course, you'll understand why when we get there. But Avengers Endgame is a great movie. It's the culmination of years of movies and all kinds of standalone things. And really, this all started way back with Iron Man, and it's been just a ride since. And really, it's just the culmination of this phase. We're going to go into a new phase, and I'm not totally sold on phase 3 yet. But we'll see. It could very well end up being even better. But man, what an emotional, heartfelt, hilarious, action-filled ride that we got in this movie alone. It was a well-deserved ending to that phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We said goodbye to Iron Man and hello to Captain Marvel, and had so many other things happen in this movie that it was just an amazing ride. I enjoyed it, and I think I gave it a 9 when we reviewed it, and that would stand true today. It was a really, really good movie.
Number 3 for me, and you want to talk about the ultimate popcorn flick, and they can make 100 of these, and I'll never get tired of watching John Wick shoot shit up. Keanu Reeves in John Wick 3 is our generation's greatest action hero, hands down. I absolutely love the supporting cast. Ian McShane, Lance Reddick, Jerome Flynn. They can make sequels for these movies till the end of time, and I will go and see every single one. Nothing but action and violence and death and car chases throughout the whole movie. John Wick was everything I wanted it to be and more. It was just a lot of fun to sit down and watch. And when these movies come out, don't wait for video. Go see the violence on the theater, because someday we'll be able to get hit with imaginary blood in the 4D experience. And that's what I really want when I go see a John Wick movie.
Every single one of those movies have been just hard hitting. But for this last installment, it was literally 2.5 hours of nonstop ass kicking. Like from beginning to end, I was at the edge of my freaking seat the entire freaking movie. And it takes a lot to really kind of draw me in and keep me that interested for that long of period of time.
One of the things they've done really well with the John Wick stuff is they've realized what the people like. And what we like in the John Wick movies is his action, how he gets through each new encounter and each new fight and the different things that he does. And what they did now, the first one had a fair amount of action. The second one had even more. And this one was just all action. So they said, well, the people like that. Let's give it to them. I don't know, short of going 4D, how they're going to up the ante in the next one. Like, are they going to have somebody poking you with needles in the back of your head while you sit there? You know, it's going to be a true 4D experience. You're going to have an usher stand behind you and do things to you while you watch the movie. They're going to have to do something, because I don't know how you could put more action in that time frame of a movie than they did in this one, because it was amazing and they got it right.
Kim, hit us with your number 2.
Avengers Endgame. Absolutely breathtaking. And there's not a whole lot left to be said that hasn't already been said by you guys about this film. But I 110% agree with IG. It's been years in the making. I personally own every Iron Man comic. I have read them cover to cover. I was enthralled. I was sad. I was excited. It was everything. And it was a true emotional roller coaster for me. There were a lot of, storylines that were coming to a close. There were a lot of things and moving parts and cogs and wheels that were going on in this movie. But the way that they kind of sent Iron Man's character out, I just thought was so touching, and it for me to be sitting in the theater of all things, an action movie, and to be so attached to an individual character. It's a true testament to Robert Downey Jr.'s acting, for one, but to start crying in a theater because he has passed, I just absolutely loved that movie so much. And it was hard for me to choose between whether or not that was going to be my number 2 or my number 1, but it's so good. So good.
Ryan, your number 2?
Number 2 for me is Us. And like for the first half of the year, I thought like it's easily number 1. It's one of my favorite movies just of all time, period. I think, Jordan Peele followed up Get Out, which was a great movie, with something that I think was even better. I think it was, a lot more cerebral, a lot more subtle, doesn't quite kind of hit you over the head with its themes, but it was one of those movies I couldn't stop thinking about for months after it came out. And I think, you mentioned Oscar nominations came out today, and the fact that Lupita Nyong'o did not get nominated is a travesty. She was so good. She was playing 2 different characters, was so good, and just did so much, just chewed up so much scenery, and just was so phenomenal in that kind of dual role, that it really sucks that she didn't get nominated, because I can't think of a performance that was better from a female actress this year. But I just really loved the movie. It was violent, it was scary, it had some great twists and turns, it was really funny, and it just lent people and fans months and months worth of just talking about it. And again, it was one of those movies that I just couldn't stop thinking about it for months. And one of my favorite movies of all time just got beaten out by something that I thought was a little bit better.
IG, your number 2?
Number 2 for me is going to be Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, it made it ahead because I think it's the new iteration of the beginning of Phase 3. And I think Spider-Man is going to be the central character like Iron Man was in all of Phase 2. And like we've said before, Tom Holland is basically the best Spider-Man that we've seen in any medium other than the actual comics themselves. And this is a pure representation, because not only is he a good Spider-Man, which we've seen pretty good Spider-Man before, but they can't do Peter Parker. Or we can see that they do a good Peter Parker, but can't do Spider-Man. This guy does both, and I just love everything about it. And this movie is pretty close to as good as it can get. And when you come up with new things like the Night Monkey, it just blew my mind. That was hilarious that they came up with a different name to try and protect that Spider-Man wasn't in Europe. Oh, that's the Night Monkey. Who thinks about that? And I just can't say enough good things about it. Tom Holland, I'm glad that he got everything worked out so that Spider-Man can stay in the MCU, because it would be a huge hole to not have him there.
Especially with losing Robert Downey Jr. The guy, he loves the role and the character so much that he called Bob Iger, the most powerful man in Hollywood right now, drunk to try to keep him in the MCU, which that is just commitment or career suicide, but it worked out for the kid, so I'm happy for him. I loved Spider-Man Far From Home, and it just shows you, like, we all have different lists, and there's probably 5 or 6 movies and TV shows in our minds that should have made these lists. 2019 was absolutely amazing, just amazing for movies and TV shows. We never ran out of things to talk about. We never had to look for something to do, which when we first started the show a couple years ago, we would go, I would be scared shitless that, oh, we don't have content for the show. And this year we didn't take a break during the holidays because there was just so much things going on. Number 2 for me was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. For movie buffs, and I didn't say snobs, but buffs, it is Christmas, your birthday, and New Year's rolled into one whenever there's a Quentin Tarantino film coming out. And this was no different. And unlike The Hateful Eight, none of it leaked. The script didn't come out. I had no hint what I was walking into. I knew the premise, but not the story. And I walked out simply in love. Despite how you feel about Quentin's politics or how he is as a person, he is a rare director that gets film to its very soul, its very essence. The acting from Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt were simply amazing. You know, it was a great buddy comedy, but it also felt like we stepped into a time machine for a few hours. And it answered the question, what would happen to the Manson family if they knocked on the wrong door? So number 2 for me was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It is an absolute gem of a movie.
And I love about this movie is the same thing he did here that he did in Inglourious Bastards, which is a rewrite of history. So it takes something that is based in reality and just shifts it, and it shifts it unexpectedly. Because when we first start seeing Sharon Tate and we see Roman Polanski and we see the era that they're living in, we're like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And then it shifts hard to the left and gets you out of there. And I love that about it. I love the little rewrites of history that like something else could have happened. Something else could have been different. And it only takes a little change to make that happen. This is why we don't need time machines, ladies and gentlemen. If you take one, you're going to shift. We don't know what would have happened, like where we'd be now, if that actually happened that way. So
yeah, we learned about this in Terminator.
Yeah, we did learn about this in Terminator that, you know, sometimes it's not going to make any difference and it's going to end up the same way. Sometimes it's going to be hugely different, but it's really well acted. I believe it got a fair amount of nods in the Oscar nominations as well. I think 8 or something like that. But yeah, good movie, great acting, really well shot. And again, a lot of good music in it, just like we'd love to talk about here.
Kim, what was your number 1 for 2019?
My number 1 was Joker. I thought Joaquin Phoenix was breathtaking. I felt like the entire storyline was jarring but emotionally captivating. Being able to see somebody's slow descent into literal madness, you know, at a time when things are just should have been okay, they were otherwise chaotic, you know, and even though he didn't say a whole lot, he was able to convey through raw emotion how he would, you know, how an individual could easily go down the wrong path, you know, if they didn't have the right help, if all the systems and all the things that could be available to somebody failed them and they just gave up on themselves, what would happen. And to be honest with you, it was just, it struck something in me that was just awe-inspiring. I thought his performance was perfect. I think he deserves every single Emmy nod, you know, every award that is coming his way for this performance. And to be honest with you, it takes a lot as a Marvel person to be able to say that DC knocked everything else that Marvel did this past year out of the park. And this is what I'm choosing as my favorite movie for the entire freaking year is kind of a big deal. But it was just so well done. So well done.
Yeah, Ryan was Team Joker upon first preview, and I was a little antsy about it. I wasn't on board. I didn't think it was going to be right, and he keeps calling for these DC one-offs. And, I mean, Ryan, you were right. I don't like to admit it when you are, but you were 100% right about the Joker being an amazing film. Ryan, what was your number 1 for 2019?
So number 1 was Parasite, which if you haven't seen it, so you know I said Us is one of my favorite movies of all time, and Parasite, one of the best movies I've seen, you know, it maybe in the last 10 years, maybe longer. It was by a Korean director. I forget his name now. It's a Korean film, and it is a kind of folk
Sung Jun
Boon Jun something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's It's phenomenal. It's about they can have two families that it's centered around. One that is really poor, like struggling to make ends meet, and then another family that's very wealthy and well off. And it kind of starts with the poor family, the son kind of getting a job working as a tutor, and then watching this poor family try to take advantage of the rich family, and then it just kind of devolves from there, and it takes some crazy twists and turns, and it's just. It got a bunch of Oscar nominations. I think it does deserve Best Picture. I
think it got a Critics' Choice Award or two, didn't it?
And
Got a Golden Globe,
and it deserves it deserves all the awards. It's that good of a movie. It's hard to watch. It's uncomfortable, but it's beautifully shot. It's an amazing story. It's kind of riveting. You're glued to the screen, the entire time once it gets going. And there's some just really hard gut punches, and again, some great twists and turns. And it's really a phenomenal movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but if you haven't, you should make that your next movie to go see, because it really is one of the best movies of the decade, and hard pressed to find many movies that are better than that. It's really that well made.
I think the director, when he was accepting his Golden Globe, said it right when he's like, audiences need to get past the 1-inch subtitles on the movie to really understand that there are great movies everywhere. And so this is on my list now of things to watch. I haven't seen it yet, but I can get past the subtitles. I've seen some other movies that were subtitled. I saw Kung Fu Hustle subtitled, and I liked that one. And that was a comedy, but I'll go watch a Gut Punch subtitled. Why not?
Well, since Ryan was right about Joker and he deemed it his #1 movie of the year, I will also learn to read and then watch the movie so I can read the subtitles. IG, what is your #1 movie of the year? Well,
as the real biggest fan of Star Wars on the Cinik Radio podcast, it's got to be Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Shocker. You know what? This movie didn't do everything right, and very few of the Star Wars films had. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's Rogue One and Empire Strikes Back are the ones that basically did everything right. But this did enough right, and it was enough fun, and it was on the edge of my seat through the whole 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm hearing there's going to be an additional cut coming out with more stuff on it that I'll go throw my money at them again and sit in the theater again and watch it again with new stuff added, even if it's only another 30 seconds. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was well acted. I thought it was beautifully shot. I think the special effects were second to none. It was really, really well done. And a decent end for me to the Skywalker saga. I'm hoping that they don't continue on Skywalker names and lands and everything else. I hope they go a whole new direction. Maybe make some Mandalorian movies, and I'd be happy with that. But for the Skywalker saga, for the original 9 going on, I'm good if this is where it ends. It was entertaining. It was heartbreaking a couple of times in it. That ended up not being true, but at the moment I was ready to throw tears. Spoiler alert, things happened. Anyway, I enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I can't have this not at my number one.
I'm just going to say you sounded more enthusiastic for Good Boys, but but you answered it. You can't not have a Star Wars movie at #1, so.
Yeah, it is what it is.
I love the movie. It wasn't without its problems, but I enjoyed it. I'll probably watch it 100 more times throughout my lifetime. And like you, I'm glad that the saga has kind of come to an end, and maybe we can move on to some fresh and new content, Mandalorian or a bounty hunter film or some origin stories, anything but another Han Solo movie. And I would absolutely be happy with the direction of the Star Wars universe. But let me ask you guys this. How in the hell do you close a storyline that was 10 plus years in the making and 20 films with hundreds of heroes and villains in it? It seems like it would be so hard. Actually, for the Russo brothers, it was super easy, barely an inconvenience. The fandoms are killing everything that comes out these days, and in unison, they all loved this epic movie. It got a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. It went on to be one of the highest grossing movies of all time. It's #1, not because I'm not sure that Marvel could ever top this achievement, which was Avengers Endgame. It had every character and it had so many epic moments, and it made you want to stand up and cheer, and it made you want to cry, and there were even a few deaths that might stay permanent. I mean, this is without a doubt my favorite movie of 2019. Sorry, Rise of Skywalker, but for now, Marvel wears the crown, and in unison, fans everywhere are screaming, Avengers, assemble.
And that's it. You made it to the end of another episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, who you can find at CINIKRADIO.com. Also, we had Ryan, who you can find at thejimwits.com, and Kim, who you can find at kmcartworks.com. Great artists. Go check out some really cool stuff. We'll be back next week with some new stuff for you, probably some news as well. Send your crazy news stories, any comments, questions, and concerns to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. Find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO, and find us on Instagram at CINIKRADIO. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, CINIK, and get your own Cinik Radio podcast gear. T-shirts, mugs, cups, stickers, all the cool Cinik Radio podcast stuff you could possibly want. It'd help the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for all the love and support. Keep listening, sharing it with your friends, like, listen, and subscribe. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.